IEC 291, and welcome to January the 27th, 2015 Higher Level Teaching and Thinking Lecture. I'm going to be talking today a little bit about learning and how that learning takes place within a child. So when looking at this slide, this is the way you need to begin to think about your children as they're learning. Remember the other night in lecture, I began talking to you about the process and that it was better for the children to have that process than it was for the product. So it's the process over the product. In educational terms, we call that divergent thinking. So this divergent thinking is a pattern of learning skills that we look at as a teacher. It's the skills that are looked at in that process. And when we look at those skills that happen within the process, then we're actually looking at the individual and their learning style, their values, their likes, their dislikes, their culture, all those different types of things. Now we know in developmentally appropriate practice, there are 3 core principles that are embedded into that term, developmentally appropriate practice. Number 1 is that we know child development. At this stage of the game, as you are graduating from this program, you should know child development. You should know the milestones of children and how those progress. The second core value is that you understand how all of that works and fits together with the child. So you know that each individual child becomes an individual. Rather than looking at a group of 3-year-olds, we're looking at 12 individuals. So that's the second core value of developmentally appropriate practice. The third core value is the fact that we are culturally receptive. That means that we recognize that culture is of value, that the families are of value, that what's being taught at home, what's being the family culture, the family values, all those types of things are a part of the makeup of that child, and we value those. So with that being understood, then we have to look at the learning process. This is a visual of how learning takes place. So the first thing that we look at is the sensory perception. So that means seeing, touching, hearing, smelling, tasting. All of those things, that's the first thing that a child needs to do in order for the learning process to happen. Once that sensory perception is engaged, then it goes into what they call the memory storage. That's where we store what we've seen, what we've touched, what we've tasted, what we felt, what we've heard, and then we can retrieve. So we have the retrieval process. So then it just starts spinning again all the way around. So in stage 1, when we begin to look at the sensory perception, again, we're talking about hearing sounds, seeing readings, touching objects, tasting new things. Now, you got to remember that when you present a child with a new food, it takes up to 36 times for their taste bud to actually accept that sensory new taste. So we can't expect that when we present a child with peas for the first time in their whole life, that they're going to like them. They're going to spit them out. Now, a lot of times when you feed babies fruit before you feed them a vegetable, because that fruit is sweet, their sensories get on that and they like that. So then they don't like the peas, they don't like the vegetables. So that's why it's important for you to understand that feeding vegetables first to infants is the best route to go, so that they will grab a hold of those taste for those vegetables and then add the fruits later. And also, when you're thinking about teaching children, you've got to consistently present sounds and readings and touchings and tastings and allow those opportunities, because what did we say? It's the sensory perception that kicks it over into the storage, the memory storage, which is our working memory. And again, we have to do this consistently over and over and over to grab a hold of the mastery task and to master whatever it is that the child is learning, so that retrieval can take place. So when we move into the memory storage, we're asking how and when. You're asking, what makes this child learn? Is this child a left brain? Is this child a right brain? How do we get this material into their long-term memory so that the child can retrieve it and bring it back? One of the ways that educational people are saying that the greatest retrieval happens in the memory is when we apply it to a real life situation. So that means when they have basically hands-on learning, or there's a life connection to whatever is being learned. So you're asking yourself this: when you learn, I learn best if I do this. I learn the most from listening to lectures or being hands-on. I enjoy learning when I'm part of the learning process or when I'm just sitting there in lecture. The same is true with your children. Begin to ask yourself, when you're teaching a class and something is not working, are the kids learning best if I do this? Are the kids learning most from sitting or from engaging? Do the kids enjoy learning when they are part of the process? So they have learning styles too, just like you do. So thinking about left brain and right brain, think about where you are. Let's talk about what's the difference between a right brain and a left brain person. Well, in essence, I can tell you this. If you look at the left brain, you see that there's all kinds of little buildings there. I relate that more to probably if you look at a waffle and you see the little squares. A person that is left brain thinks in patterns. Excuse me. They think in compartments. So a lot of times they can only think about and engage in one concept at a time. Most left brain people are very mathematical. They're absolute. They're black. It's either black or it's white. There's no gray areas in there. Right brain people are creative. They are engaging. They can They can think and multitask at the same time. They can carry on a conversation about 3 or 4 different things in one conversation. A lot of times we relate right brain people as if you were looking at a plate of spaghetti, because they can actually do a lot of spaghettiing, as we call it. When you think about your own personal relationships, male and female, you can see where a lot of males are left brain and a lot of females are spaghetti. But that doesn't mean that just because you're a female, you're spaghetti, and if you're a male, you're waffle. That doesn't mean that, even though there's a book written about that. Men are waffles, women are spaghetti. I would say that that's true a majority of the time, but not all the time, because I have seen women who are extremely left brain or waffle, and I've seen men who are very creative and oftentimes can spaghetti just as good as a woman can. So I don't think that it's generic, gender based. I think it's an individual based thing, and a lot of times I think it's how you train your brain. A lot of times, so I have learned, because I'm predominantly right brained, but as I go through my PhD program, I am slowly gaining a lot of left brain thinking patterns, and it's different for me. But as I engage in the process, the left side of my brain is growing. So, in essence, your kids are like that too. So, you've got to do activities that engage both sides of the brain, because as you see, there's bridges between the two. And as we get them to move across the axis, then the process begins to take place.
Attention please, this is a Bluegrass Community and Technical College SNAP alert. Bluegrass Lawrenceburg, all please. Tuesday, January 27.